Level 1, the recruit. You are standing on a beach at 3 in the morning and the Pacific Ocean is trying to kill you. Not metaphorically. The water temperature is 53 degrees and the instructor just told your class to link arms and walk into the surf zone until the waves are breaking over your heads, and you are going to stay there until he says otherwise. The cold enters you like a decision. It moves through your wetsuit, through your skin, through the muscle and into the bone, and your body, the body you have spent years building, the body you were proud of 48 hours ago, begins making calculations about survival that your mind is not invited to participate in. This is the first lesson. Your mind is not in charge here. You've been awake for 31 hours. You ran 8 miles in soft sand this morning, swam 2 miles in open water this afternoon, and spent 4 hours doing log PT. 6 men carrying a telephone pole overhead while instructors walk alongside and explain, in conversational tones, that you are going to be doing this for the rest of your life and you are welcome to leave at any time. The bell is right there. 1 pull, 1 ring, and a warm van, dry clothes, and the rest of your military career waiting in some less demanding configuration. You look at the bell sometimes. Everyone looks at the bell. The difference between the people who ring it and the people who don't is not physical. You understand this already, and it's only day 2. The man who quit this morning, a distance runner, 6'2", built like architecture, was physically superior to half the class. He quit because he was waiting to feel ready. Because somewhere in his psychology was the belief that readiness was a threshold you crossed before committing. What BUD/S teaches you, brutally and immediately, is that readiness is a lie. You are never ready. You go anyway. Standing in the surf zone now, your arms linked with men you've known for 48 hours, something strange happens. The cold crosses a threshold past pain and arrives at something else. Something almost still. Your body is shaking, visibly, involuntarily, a muscle response to hypothermia that you cannot control, but your mind has gone quiet in a way that is unlike anything you've experienced before. The internal monologue, that constant narrating voice that manages your social self and worries about your image and plans the future, it has gone completely silent. There is only the water, the cold, the arms of the men beside you, the present moment, so compressed and so immediate that nothing else can fit inside it. Feels inexplicably like freedom. You'll spend years trying to understand why suffering can feel like freedom. You'll develop a theory eventually that the self only feels free when it's shed everything unnecessary, and pain is the most efficient mechanism for that shedding. But right now, in 53-degree water at 3 in the morning, you don't need a theory. You just need to stay. Your class started with 187 men. By the end of the first week, 41 have rung the bell. You are not one of them. And the realization, standing on the grinder, soaking wet, exhausted in a way that goes beyond physical, that you are still here, that you chose this again and again every hour of every day this week, produces a feeling so deep and so specific that it rewires something in you permanently. You are not the same person who drove through the gate on Monday. You don't know yet how different you're going to become. Level 2, the student. The first thing you learn is that power is not loud. You expected the life to feel dramatic. You'd been raised on your father's legend, the stories that filtered up to you despite everyone's efforts to shield you from them. You expected gunmetal and shouting and the cinematic weight of command. What you get instead is paperwork, meetings, phone calls at inconvenient hours where you listen more than you speak. The quiet men, it turns out, are quiet because they are always measuring how much you know, and the fastest way to lose their respect is to speak before you understand. So you learn to be quiet too. You sit across from your father's accountant, who is not a real accountant in any meaningful sense, and you learn how money moves, how it changes shape, how a restaurant that seats 40 people on its best night can legitimately report twice its actual revenue, and how the difference, cleaned and pressed and structured correctly, becomes capital that builds real things. You learn that the legitimate businesses are not cover stories. They are the point. Your father understood something most men in his position didn't. The goal was always to cross the river, to reach the shore where the money was clean and the name was respected and the grandchildren would never have to sit in kitchens with quiet men. He just didn't live long enough to cross it. You inherit his map, but not his relationships. And relationships in this world are everything. You begin making calls, visits. You travel to meetings where you are clearly being tested, where men twice your age offer you bad terms and watch to see if you'll accept them out of naivety or reject them without burning the relationship. You learn to read the room, to sense when an offer is a test versus when it's genuine disrespect. The line between them is thin and consequential. Too soft and you're exploited. Too hard and you're isolated. The calibration is everything. You make mistakes. One of them costs you a distribution contract worth €2 million annually. You misread a man's silence for compliance when it was actually contempt, and by the time you understand what happened, the contract is gone and the man is doing business with your competitor and smiling at you in public with the specific warmth of someone who has beaten you cleanly. You don't sleep for 3 days. Not from grief. From the education of it. You replay every moment of every meeting with that man, forensically, surgically, extracting the lesson from the loss the way a medic extracts shrapnel. You become a different kind of student after that. More patient. More clinical. The warm, slightly uncertain boy who stood at the front of that funeral pew is being quietly replaced by something more deliberate. You notice this replacement happening. You don't stop it. You also notice that you've stopped calling your university friends. Their lives, the dormitories, the bars, the exam stress, the easy geography of normal young adulthood, feel like dispatches from a country you've left without planning to. You try once, meeting a friend from school for coffee, and you sit across from him and watch him talk about his dissertation and feel a distance so vast it physically aches. Not because you miss his life, because you don't. That's what troubles you. You're 18 years old and the life of an 18-year-old already bores you. And something about that should frighten you far more than it does. Level 3, the prince. By 21, your name means something. Not everywhere. Not in the open world of restaurants and universities and ordinary ambition, but in the specific geography of people who understand what your family name carries, in those rooms, in those conversations, in the way certain calls get returned within the hour now where they once weren't returned at all. You have arrived at a specific intoxicating altitude. You've consolidated, quietly eliminated 2 supply chain inefficiencies that were hemorrhaging money. Eliminated being the clean word for a process that involved conversations you will not think about in the daylight hours. You've built a relationship with a government official in a country whose name you don't say at dinner tables that gives your logistics operation a protection it didn't have before. You've settled a territorial dispute that had been simmering since before your father died. And you settled it without violence, which surprised people, which was precisely the point. You understand now what your father's real genius was. Not the muscle. Anyone can hire muscle. His genius was the appearance of inevitability. He made people feel that working with him was the natural order of things, that resistance was not a moral choice but a failure of intelligence. You are learning to project the same thing, and the learning is working. The money is extraordinary. You drive a car that costs more than most people's houses, and the thing about real wealth, the thing they never tell you, is that it doesn't feel like excess. It feels like accuracy, like the world has finally calibrated itself to the correct resolution. You stay in hotels where the thread count of the sheets communicates a specific message about the nature of reality. You eat in restaurants where the chef comes to your table and speaks to you directly, and the conversation is genuine because you are a genuine appreciator of excellent things, and your money, however it was made, spends the same as anyone else's. But the paranoia is arriving. It arrives the way weather arrives in mountains, gradually and then all at once, and then it's simply the climate. You start noticing things. A car that appears twice on a route you very deliberately. A waiter in a restaurant who looks at you slightly too long. A phone that feels subtly warm when you haven't been using it. You change devices frequently. You vary your routes. You have a man whose entire job is to think about what your enemies would do before your enemies do it. You also stop trusting people you've known your whole life. This is the most disorienting part. The men who taught you, the quiet men from the kitchen, from the funeral, you watch them now with a layer of analysis running underneath every conversation. Not because they've done anything, Because you've learned enough about how power corrupts loyalty to understand that no loyalty is unconditional. Circumstance, fear, opportunity. Any of these can turn a man you've known for 20 years into someone who is carrying a different agenda. You've seen it happen to others. You've learned to assume it can happen to you. The analysis becomes constant, automatic, a secondary consciousness running underneath your primary one, continuously modeling the motivations of every person in your orbit. It is exhausting. You realize one evening, the most alone you have ever felt. Level 4, the ghost. You've been doing this for 4 years and your relationships back home are in varying states of damage. Some are recoverable, some are not. Your mother calls every Sunday and you answer every Sunday, and the conversations have the specific quality of people who love each other speaking across a distance that isn't geographic. She hears something in your voice that she doesn't have words for. You hear her searching for it, trying to locate her son inside the man who is answering her questions and saying the right things and being, by any observable measure, fine. You are fine. You are also, in ways that matter, somewhere she cannot reach. The operational tempo is high. Rotation cycle, deployment, home, workup, deployment, and the home periods are, paradoxically, the hardest. In theater, you function completely, fluently, with a clarity of purpose that feels like health. At home, the absence of that purpose creates a silence that your nervous system, recalibrated to high alert by years of deployment, does not know how to inhabit. You're hypervigilant in a Walmart. You scan faces in a restaurant with a speed and intensity that the woman sitting across from you finds, correctly, unsettling. You don't sleep past 4 a.m. Your body wakes itself up at the hour that operations typically launch and refuses to believe that there is no operation. You lie in bed in a house that is warm and safe and yours, and your nervous system runs its pre-mission diagnostics on an environment that has no threats, and the absence of threat reads, somehow, as threat. At work, in the teams, you are exceptional. Your reputation is solid. Operators who've worked with you would describe you with specific professional admiration, the kind of endorsement that lives entirely in the performance domain and says nothing about what happens inside the performance. You are, in the language of the community, a quiet professional. Quiet being the operative word. The things you've seen have been stored, not processed. Compressed into the architectural certainty that there isn't time, that the mission is always coming, that the men beside you need the version of you that functions and not the version that feels. You are so good at this storage that you've almost forgotten you're doing it. Almost. There's a moment, on a run, alone, dawn, the world empty and the light new, when the container opens slightly. Not completely, just a crack. And what comes through the crack is not a memory exactly. It's the specific weight of accumulated experience pressing against a door that has been held shut by willpower and operational necessity, and the deep cultural resistance of your community to anything that looks like weakness. You run faster. You close the door. You file the crack as something to deal with later. Later keeps getting postponed. And the postponing is costing you something that you don't have a name for yet, but that shows up in your face in photographs from the last 2 years. In the specific flatness behind your eyes that the people who know you best have stopped mentioning because they've learned that mentioning it doesn't help. Level 5, the veteran. You turn 27 in a villa on a coast that costs 20,000 euros a night, surrounded by people who love the version of you that you show them. You have not shown anyone the real version of you in years. Not because you're hiding it strategically, but because you've genuinely lost track of where the performance ends. The man who attends the charity galas, who speaks to journalists about responsible investment and urban regeneration, who sits on a hospital board and contributes meaningfully to those meetings. Is that performance? Or is it real? You've done it long enough that the distinction has blurred. You are beginning to understand that identity is not something you have. It's something you continuously enact. And when you enact multiple identities long enough, the original underneath them doesn't hold its shape. Your mother asks you, on the phone, in the specific quiet voice she's been using with you for years, "Are you happy?" You tell her yes. She doesn't believe you. You can hear it in the pause before she moves on. She was your father's wife for 30 years and she understands, in a way that doesn't require words, the specific kind of unhappiness that lives in men who have everything and have paid too much for it. The relationships are impossible. You've had several real ones, not the transactional company that surrounds you at the villa, and they all reach the same wall eventually. The wall is made of what you can't say. The things that happened, the decisions, the locked rooms. You can bring someone close enough to feel the warmth of your life, the beauty of it, the comfort, and then they reach the wall and they want to know what's on the other side, and there is nothing you can say. Not because of operational security, but because you don't know if they would recognize you anymore on the other side of that wall. You don't know if you recognize yourself. The paranoia has deepened into something clinical. There are days when you trust no one. Not your lawyers. Not the men who have been with you since your father's time. Not the woman you are closest to. You run threat models in your sleep. You wake at 3 in the morning with a specific alertness. A certainty that something is wrong. That takes 40 minutes to subside and leaves you staring at a ceiling, alone, in a bed that costs more than most people's cars, feeling a fear that you cannot name and cannot address because it doesn't have a specific object. The enemy is everything. The enemy is no one. The enemy is the life itself. You are the most powerful and the most imprisoned you have ever been. And somewhere very faint, very persistent, like a radio signal from a country you left a long time ago, you hear the voice of the 18-year-old who stood in the front pew and felt something ignite in his chest. He is asking you if this is what you meant. You don't answer him. Level 6, the reckoning. The call comes on a Tuesday. Not an arrest. Not a raid. Not the cinematic takedown of men in suits arriving at your door with warrants. Something quieter and more total. A man you trusted, one of the architects of the legitimate face you've spent years constructing, has been speaking to investigators for 8 months. The documentation he's provided is comprehensive. The case being built is patient and real. You have, at most, 6 months. You sit with this information in a room by yourself and you feel, for the first time in years, completely present. Every layer of performance, strategy, management, and constructed identity falls away simultaneously, and what remains is you, raw and unmediated, in a way you haven't been since you stood on a mountain in your own mind during the early lessons and understood what had been asked of you. The fear is clean, almost clarifying. You spend 3 days making decisions, calling certain people, moving certain things, having certain conversations that are completely surgically practical. Your mind, trained to run at operational capacity, performs magnificently under this pressure. You are, even now, extremely good at this, but in the spaces between the decisions, something else is happening. You are taking inventory, not of assets, of the actual life, the years, what they contained, what was real inside them and what was construction, the genuine moments, and there were some real ones, actual instances of beauty and connection and meaning that happened inside this life because life insists on meaning even when you've organized everything against it. The birthday in the kitchen with your mother, the laughter real, the warmth genuine. A morning in a city you'd visited for work where you walked alone for 2 hours and felt, inexplicably, like yourself. The moment 2 years ago when a man you'd helped legitimate, a former associate who wanted the same crossing your father had wanted, called to tell you he'd done it properly, finally, and you felt something so close to pride you had to sit down. These things were real. The rest of it, the empire, the architecture, the sovereign management of a world that required you to become less and less human to maintain. You are looking at it now with the specific clarity of a man who is about to lose it, and the thing that surprises you most, the thing that will stay with you longest, is this: you are not as devastated as you expected to be. Some part of you, locked in a room in your chest, has been waiting for this, has been waiting to put it down. The weight of what you inherited at 18, the weight of what you built on top of it, the weight of who you became in the process. It is so heavy that the prospect of losing it carries, inside its terror, a thin thread of something that feels dangerously like relief. You think about your father in the casket. You think about the boy you were supposed to be. The one in London or Milan studying economics, making ordinary mistakes, building an ordinary life of ordinary dimensions that contained all the things you sacrificed for size. You don't know if you'd trade it. You know you paid too much. You know those are not the same thing.